Britain, late 1960s. The railways were slowing, confidence was fading, and passengers were drifting away. Electrification was promised but unfinished. Diesel was meant to be temporary, not transformative. Cars and planes were winning. British Rail was running out of time. So instead of waiting for the future, they forced it. This is the story of the fastest diesel train ever made, the InterCity 125. Before the HST, by the late 1960s, Britain's railways were stuck in an uncomfortable middle ground. Steam was gone, and diesel had taken over. But the promised leap forward never really arrived. Trains were cleaner and cheaper to run, yet journey times barely improved. Delays were common. Comfort was inconsistent. Public confidence was slipping away. Cars were becoming faster and more affordable. Short-haul flights were eating into long-distance routes. Rail, once the backbone of national travel, felt dated. The real problem wasn't demand. People still needed to move between cities. The problem was belief. Electrification was the long-term plan, but only parts of the network were wired. Finishing the job would take decades and enormous investment. Waiting meant losing passengers now. British Rail found itself cornered. It could either accept slow decline or prove that rail could still deliver speed and reliability with what already existed. Diesel trains had a reputation for being practical but uninspiring. Few believed they could ever be genuinely fast. Britain didn't need a minor upgrade. It needed a moment that changed perception. Something bold enough to make people look at diesel rail and think differently. And that moment would arrive from an idea many dismissed as unrealistic. And before we step into the next section, make sure you subscribe because we're just getting started. The idea that emerged sounded almost naive. What if Britain didn't wait for electrification at all? What if diesel could be pushed far beyond what anyone thought reasonable, using the tracks already in place? To many, it sounded like wishful thinking. Diesel engines were heavy. High speed meant vibration, instability, and wear. British track geometry wasn't designed for sustained fast running. Safety margins were tight, but the engineers saw opportunity where others saw limits. The issue wasn't diesel power itself. It was the way trains were arranged. Instead of a single locomotive hauling passive coaches, they proposed a fixed formation. Power cars at each end, lightweight coaches in between, balanced forces, better aerodynamics. The goal wasn't incremental, it was clear and brutal. 125 miles per hour on diesel every day. That number became the name, InterCity 125. If it worked, Britain could buy time. If it failed, it would confirm every criticism aimed at British Rail. And to make it work, engineering would have to be smarter than reputation. The InterCity 125 wasn't designed to look futuristic. It was designed to behave differently. The sloped nose reduced air resistance. The body profile minimized turbulence. Every choice served stability at speed. Each power car carried a high-output diesel engine, producing over 2,200 horsepower. With one at each end, acceleration was smooth and braking forces were balanced. There was no need to turn the train around and no dead weight dragging behind. The coaches were just as important. Lightweight construction reduced stress on the track. Suspension was tuned for high-speed confidence rather than low-speed softness. Wheel sets and bogies were carefully engineered to stay composed at speeds most diesel trains never approached. When testing began, expectations were shattered. The train didn't just reach 125 miles per hour, it held it, calmly, repeatedly. In 1973, a prototype reached 143.2 miles per hour, setting a diesel world speed record that still stands. Diesel hadn't merely kept up, it had broken assumptions. Now British Rail faced the real test. Could this speed survive real passengers, real timetables, and real pressure? When the InterCity 125 entered service in the mid-1970s, the reaction was immediate and quietly shocking. Journey times fell overnight. Routes that had felt long and tiring suddenly became manageable, even routine. London to Bristol, London to Leeds, London to Edinburgh on the East Coast Main Line. Rail started winning back time, but what surprised passengers most wasn't the headline number. It was how calm it felt. At 125 miles per hour, the HST didn't rattle or roar. It glided. Acceleration was smooth. braking confident, and the ride steady enough that people could read, work, even forget how fast they were moving. Timetables tightened, punctuality improved, trust returned. For British Rail, this wasn't just a good launch. It was a reputational reset. Diesel trains were no longer second-best placeholders waiting for electrification. They were delivering genuine high-speed travel on existing infrastructure. Business travelers came back. InterCity rail felt competitive again. The InterCity brand transformed from apology into aspiration. The most remarkable part was how quickly speed became normal. Passengers stopped talking about how fast the train was and started expecting it to be that way. And once speed became expected, diesel's reputation would never be the same again. Before the HST, diesel rail in Britain carried a quiet stigma. Practical, yes. Efficient, mostly. But exciting? Never. The InterCity 125 erased that perception almost overnight. Here was a diesel train outperforming expectations in daily service. Not just in testing, but year after year, it matched and sometimes beat electric schedules. It ran long distances with consistency that airlines struggled to match. And it did so without new wires, new tracks, or massive disruption. The effect rippled outward. Airlines lost passengers on short domestic routes. Driving long distances became less appealing. Rail reclaimed its place as the sensible choice for intercity travel. More importantly, British Rail regained confidence. The HST proved that speed wasn't about brute power. It was about balance, aerodynamics, maintenance discipline, and system thinking. Diesel hadn't been slow by nature. It had been underused. Other countries studied the design. Engineers took notes. But few copied it directly, because the HST wasn't just a technical solution. It was a response to a uniquely British problem. And it worked so well that it outlived every expectation placed upon it, which meant this temporary solution was about to become permanent. The InterCity 125 never tried to look futuristic. It didn't chase headlines or bold styling. It earned loyalty the slow way, by being there every day and doing its job exceptionally well. Over time, its shape became familiar, its sound recognizable. For millions of passengers, the HST wasn't remarkable because it was fast. It was remarkable because it was dependable. You planned your day around it. You trusted it. While other ambitious projects faded, the HST adapted. Engines were upgraded, interiors refreshed, safety systems modernized. Through political change, privatization, and shifting priorities, it kept running. Few trains anywhere in the world matched its longevity. What was meant to bridge a gap of a decade served for nearly half a century. That endurance turned the HST into something rare. Not a museum piece, but a working icon. A train people grew up with, commuted on, and measured others against. But no matter how successful, time always closes in. Even the most reliable machines eventually face a future they weren't designed for. And the HST's farewell would come not from failure, but from progress. By the 2000s, the InterCity 125 was no longer the newest thing on the rails. Emissions rules tightened, accessibility standards evolved. New electric and bi-mode trains promised better efficiency and lower running costs. None of this made the HST bad. It simply made it old in a world that kept moving. Withdrawals began gradually. Some sets were shortened, others reassigned to secondary routes. Familiar diagrams quietly disappeared from timetables. There was no scandal, no crisis, no sudden collapse in reliability. The HST was being replaced because it had succeeded for too long. For crews, the farewell was personal. Drivers trusted these trains. Engineers respected them. Passengers noticed when the old roar gave way to something quieter and more modern. Rail fans turned up with cameras. The final runs filled quickly. The HST left service the same way it entered it. Calm, composed, on time. Not pushed out by failure, but overtaken by a future it helped make possible. And only in its absence did many realize how extraordinary its run had been. The InterCity 125 changed what Britain expected from rail. Before it, speed felt aspirational. After it, speed became normal. Timetables tightened. Long-distance rail regained confidence. The idea that diesel had a ceiling was quietly dismantled. Its influence wasn't loud, but it was lasting. Designers learned that aerodynamics mattered on conventional tracks. Operators learned that reliability could be engineered, not hoped for. Planners learned that you didn't always need perfect infrastructure to deliver great service. Most importantly, passengers learned to trust rail again. They planned meetings around it. They chose it over cars and planes. That trust didn't come from marketing. It came from years of trains doing exactly what they promised. And the record still stands. 143.2 miles per hour. Diesel. No successor has tried to beat it because the world moved on to wires and high-speed electrics. The HST remains a product of a very specific moment when diesel had to be brave, not efficient, which is why its achievements still feel so singular. The reason no diesel train has surpassed the HST isn't a lack of technology, it's a lack of need. Once electrification expanded, speed moved to overhead wires. Diesel's role shifted toward flexibility, efficiency, and mixed traffic work. The InterCity 125 exists in a narrow window of history, a time when Britain needed speed immediately without waiting decades or rebuilding the network from scratch. Engineers had to extract everything possible from diesel, and then some. That pressure no longer exists. Modern rail problems are different. Energy use matters more than outright velocity. Emissions matter more than records. And when speed is required, electricity does the job better. So the HST's record remains untouched. Not because it's unbeatable, but because no one has reason to try. It stands as proof of what happens when constraints force creativity, when reputation is ignored, when engineers ask not what they should build, but what they must. And that makes the InterCity 125 more than just fast. It makes it irreplaceable. The InterCity 125 didn't just redefine what diesel trains could do, it rescued British long-distance rail at a moment when decline felt inevitable. Built as a stopgap, it became a benchmark. Designed under constraint, it delivered excellence. While electrification stalled and budgets tightened, the HST proved that speed, comfort, and reliability were still possible with imagination and discipline. It didn't rely on futuristic infrastructure or grand promises. It worked with what Britain already had and made it better than anyone thought possible. That's why it lasted. That's why it mattered. The HST wasn't loud about its success. It didn't chase records for attention. It simply showed up every day on time at 125 miles per hour and rebuilt trust one journey at a time. Today, its diesel speed record still stands, not because no one can beat it, but because the world moved in a different direction. The InterCity 125 remains a reminder that sometimes the most important machines aren't the ones that change everything forever. They're the ones that arrive exactly when they're needed most. So now, if you enjoyed this deep dive into a train that rewrote the rules, hit subscribe for more stories about machines that arrived when they were needed most. And tell us in the comments, which engineering underdog do you think deserves legend status?